This book is about the prehistory of Southern California. It's the book, I wrote the book I wanted to read. It began as a performance many years ago, and then, did one of those things of burning a hole in my file cabinet because it needed to be a book, and eventually I sat down, stopped everything, and did it. And gratefully, the University of Nebraska published it. It won awards, and I've been giving readings from it, but not for a while, and I love this book. So it's a pleasure to share a few little excerpts, and then I'm going to read new work, which is also a pleasure because it's always a thrill to get the words out and see what they sound like. It's always a really good feedback system for writing. So Sacred Sites, as I said, is about the origins of the Southern California landscape. And by Southern California landscape, it basically covers really from Point Conception, but more thoroughly from Ventura to Palm Springs. And the land is geographically all of a piece, has the same history. And indigenously, in our cultural history, this is the land of the Southern Chumash, as you probably know, and then just across the Simi Hills, which is the borderland through Topanga, we're in the land of the Northern Tongva. The Tongva are a part of a cultural group called the Uto-Aztecan. It's a language family that encompasses, and it's a cultural family too, it encompasses the people from the Northern Tongva, which blend with the Southern Chumash at this borderland, and then go all the way through the Cahuilla in Palm Springs. So their territory is a big territory, but the Chumash territory is a big territory too. So this book, it begins with the Big Bang and comes all the way up to the present, talking about how the land was formed. And then the second book, and believe me, this is a deal, you get two books in one. The second book is about the indigenous myths and songs that deal with the same perennial question: how did things come to be the way they are? So we have a cultural history that's at minimum 15,000 years old, some of the earliest habitations of North America, some of the most sophisticated groups in North America, and so few people know that we stand on the shoulders of an ancient and venerable people. Their stories are marvelous: poetry, epic poetry, mythic poetry, and I found examples of personal poetry, which are all from digging deep into the record, which are all in the book. So let's begin at the beginning. I'm going to read the origins of the universe, and then I'm going to read a little piece from a Chumash myth from this area. In the beginning, unutterable, hot, no space, no time, not shape, not size, not taste, not smell, not see, not touch, a singular nothing, nothing at all, compressed to a point, infinitely dense, wobbling. 14 billion years ago, colossal balloon, the Big Bang, seething radiation, no center, no edge, roiling, gaseous universe soup. Pure energy pops riotous sparks, or the spectral harmonics of minute energy strings. Wild, infinitesimal bits, the 6 quarks, up, down, strange, charmed, truth, beauty, the 3 leptons, electron, muon, tauon, and the little neutral ones, neutrinos, whirl in and out of colliding light, particle annihilating antiparticle, blasting photons at every turn. The first frenzied pips radiate forever into unfathomable mystery. What caused it? Came before it? Into what belly, what field did it blast? Energy to mass, mass to energy, plasma pounding to particles and back to wave. Gravity overcome by the speeding expansion and walloping heat. The Big Bang births space as it expands, time as it travels, doubling its size in seconds. Shock waves throb through the plasma, ringing the cosmos like a temple bell. Temperature falling, the hot whirling slightly cools. 3 quarks cling to each other and settle as protons. 3 quarks cling to each other and settle as neutrons. Electrons settle, forms ripen in nothing's singular field. The same proton, neutron, electron throughout space and time. Star, tongue, tear, plastic fork. Our bodies as old as the cosmos. This was one of the, thank you. Okay. This was one of the most important lessons that I learned from all the research that I did for this book, I have to say, is that, that old saw that we hear, everything's connected. Well, guess what? Everything is connected according to contemporary science. Who knew? Because there is, in the world of forms, of course we know that nowadays we know that most of the universe is dark matter or dark energy, way over 80%. I mean, this world of forms is a minuscule part of what is, at least, to date. And of course we know this is all going to change. But for now, that's what it looks like. And so this precious world of forms, everything, as far as you can see, as far in as you can see, is the same thing. What about that? It's the same proton and the same electron. I mean, identical. And the only reason that there's all these different shapes, like a chair, this, is because they cook. It's like recipes. One is so hot, this one cooks into this one cooks, and it just keeps generating all these different forms. I give some of the recipes in the book. I mean, that just astounded me. Not only that my body and your body and this body is as old as the universe, of course, that wasn't so astounding, but that really and truly, we are part and parcel. No separation. Isn't that fabulous? I just love that. Okay, I'm going to read a little section of a myth from the Southern Chumash. The people of Southern California have flood myths, like people all around the world. The flood is a worldwide event. And there are many theories about why these flood myths exist, from right around the same, thought to be around the same amount time frame. The theory that I buy into is that they were generated by what happened at the end of the last ice age with the massive floodings that we know took place in North America at the end of the ice age, really devastating floods. So this is a little tiny section from the Southern Chumash flood myth. I'm going to talk a little bit to set it up. Okay, before the flood, after creation, the world was populated by the first people, capital F, capital P. And this is everything. Every form, the wind, the rain, everything you can think of that's in a form, nowadays that was in a form, was a people then. And this is a description of the first people. The first people, reasonable, willful, emotional, powerful, lived well in the first world, keeping the balance for a very long time. So that was their big task, to enjoy themselves, which they did, and to keep the balance. Okay, this is going to play into us after the flood, because the flood is the great marker in the myths between the world of the first people and the world of human beings. Okay, so let me read just this little piece. The way the people in Ventura say it, rain started and wouldn't stop as the ocean waters rose. Only Spotted Woodpecker, he'd be one of the first people, only Spotted Woodpecker survived because he flew to the top of the tallest tree in the world. When the water reached his feet, he cried out to his uncle, Sun. You have to know in the Chumash myth, Sun was a creator figure, and Sun is not in the world of forms, he's in the world of energy. And he lives in a crystal palace way up in the sky with his 2 daughters and all his pets. Well, his pets are rattlesnakes and bears and every biting thing you can think of. This crazy household, can you imagine? Oh, and the other thing is that, Sun is a cannibal. He prefers babies and plump women, FYI. Okay, so he's not like a nice guy, but he has a great house. Okay, when the waters reached his feet, he cried out to his uncle, Sun, "I'm drowning, uncle, pity me, help me." The Sun's 2 daughters heard him. They saw how stiff and cold he was and begged their father to help him. Sun agreed and held his blazing torch so close to the water that it steamed and started to recede. Warmed by the sun, Spotted Woodpecker was able to snatch from the water the 2 acorns Sun tossed to him. Sun tossed 2 more acorns close to the tree. Woodpecker ate those and was no longer hungry. That's why woodpeckers love to eat acorns. When the flood was over, Spotted Woodpecker was alone. Rocks in the mountains still hold the shape of the first people who drowned. They were very tall and could wade across to the islands with their carrying nets full of chia and acorns to trade with the islanders. Very old people have seen their huge bones, yards long, on Santa Rosa Island. So with the flood, the first people either died or, according to the myths, were transformed into the landscape. So literally, according to these myths, we walk, we breathe, we're rained upon by the bodies of the first people. Thus, of course, everything is sacred. This is the original place. So after the first people were transformed into the physical world, the human beings arrive in the myths, both in the Chumash myth and the Tongva myth. And the human being's job, so taking over for the first people, is to be the singers and the balance keepers. And if the human beings don't do their jobs correctly, keep the ceremonies, take care of the landscape, of the body of the first people, things go horribly out of balance. What can we say? Our job is to be singers and balance keepers, and let us keep that in mind. So now I'll read a few poems. The first couple are from a manuscript I've completed called Radiant Blues. It's out floating around looking for its publisher. This is a prose poem. It's titled, He Wore Hats. He wore hats, 2 or 3 at a time, stacked like shrugs that end arguments when the person on top lays bare the conversation and says so. Pieces of my heart loved him. I felt a smile shaping my face when I stood next to him. I liked the way he lived openly with his complex world. He didn't simplify, for example, by wearing one hat. He didn't encourage me to simplify either. When I looked at him wearing his stack of gray, brown, straw, I remembered the seasons and the way the light changes. A single day is not a simple event. I used to live a day by paring it down to a slice, flinging the rest, flinging and not looking where it landed, not following its fortunes in the compost, beneath a bush by the sidewalk, in the murk of a battered dumpster, into the black beak of an urban bird. Not my brimmed friend. He took hostage what time buries alive. He saved this stash of days from burning out to a stubbed butt. He stuffed it into a bag and handed it off to me. Okay, now we're going to get real hopeful. Okay. This poem is titled, Grab It, Baby. Grab it, baby. Grab this flowering, flowing forth, and bottle your surrender to it right now and before our very eyes. I want to see our four hands slide into a wish, leaving out and forever the word falter. Let's not send out or rescind the rainbow spectrum bursting through lonely blades of white light. Let's not look into this heart of hearts with only two eyes. Our hands and eyes are 8, and 8 is 4, and 4 is the four corners of the universe, with the single eye of Ra gazing straight down the middle. Let's toss a coin into the glittering fountain, Ra's eye, with the only wish that's ever granted, the one and only wish that knits front to back and side to side, sets hot to cool, turns the cooled off hot, ignites our shadows, illuminates the night. So the early discourses of the Buddha were recorded in the language called Pali. And in Pali, the word for suffering is dukkha. Plentitude. I have taught one thing, and one thing only, from the Buddha's first discourse. Suffering, said the Buddha, dukkha, in plenitude, in the joyous afternoon, in the clear sky cold, in night-burdened starlight so old its sparkle would smell like ripe cheese if our two hands caught it, pulled it close for a stinging bite. Suffering, said the Buddha, dukkha, sloughs off the rind, buffs our nails until they shine. Breathe in suffering. Breathe out suffering. So I asked him in my weariness, who isn't happy when the pockets jingle smartly, walking distance to market stalls, walking with limber limbs, dining with satisfactory teeth? Is there another prayer, he asked me? Does happiness saturate the air so deeply steeped as suffering? To my silence, he asked, shall I go on? And he raised my eyes with the sun, with the moon, flooding light on overturned bowls, piled like bleached shells. More? He asked me, plumping my pillow, sweetening my tea, as he followed his breath to and from the green leaves and bowed to the anthills busily living lace. I wrote this poem in January when I think here as well, the Santa Anas were really hitting us hard. Santa Anas and bad fires and smoke and the whole, as you know very well. It was a tough month. So this poem was inspired by that moment, those days. Santa Anas, January. The wind shows us, Didion. 1. The garden folds its wings and rests. Sea-whirled gusts catch the frayed leaves, still clinging to the bean vines. Fig leaves yellow and fall from pale branches wound in a gray nest above the trunk. Beneath lies the compost, falling apart. 2. I ignore burnt Baghdad. I've been to Paris more than once. Never those cities exploding to rubble, heaped with ancient litter, layering blood-soaked sand dunes, mapped with stone pillars, now stone piles. On my usual walk, Westridge, an uplift, late afternoon, golden sunlight caught on the sides of myriad glass buildings, flared into the air, torches illuminating smog and smoke. Jets rumbling along their flight lines while the city below simmers, delivering exhaust and a payload of passengers. 3. Hard, dry winds from the desert, retreating Santa Anas, catch my hat, push me back, spinning me away from the sea, carrying me east until I stand on a ridge in the Levant, feeling the winds winding around the world catch hold of my clothes like weather. The fires we send east blow all the way back. And I'll conclude with this poem, Lineage. It's dedicated to Hugh Thompson Jr. You may know that he was the man who attempted to stop the My Lai massacre and suffered mightily for his bravery and courage, I must say, that he's one of my great heroes. Lineage. When steel points drive through the flesh, wrenching bone from bone, and greed's harrowing grip, and the grip of hatred throttle anyone they choose, and rage hammers the heart, someone refuses orders. Someone pulls the wounded to shelter at the side of the road. Someone's hands are roused by a mystery, a vapor our lives depend upon, ever present. We breathe, whether we know it or not. And those whose bodies absorb its grace act, and the act is love. In hindsight, in the history books where the count is taken, a lineage of love marks the bloody pages like a streak of light. My pleasure. A great audience.